Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a special Our Revolution program where we're going to have a lot of discussion about things on the ballot. These are things that often the way they're written, people don't know what they're really about, and we're hoping we can bring a lot of clarity to that so people can make informed decisions when they vote. Um, we're going to start, first of all, trying to learn what all of this is about. Like, what's the difference on the things on the ballot, like between a measure, a resolution, uh, what else do they put on? Bonds, how they name them, that kind of thing. And we're going to hear from Alfred on that. Alfred, I think probably most people here know he's one of the strongest activists in the East Bay. And he's currently running to be elected on the rent board here in Berkeley. And in fact, I'll say now, anybody that's actually currently running for the office, please take a minute to introduce and talk about your campaign in addition to what we're doing here today. Okay, Alfred, welcome.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Alfred Twu. I work as an architect and I'm also a planning commissioner, and I'm running for the rent board as part of our tenant slate, the right to housing slate, which includes Dominique, Xavier, Avery, and myself. So in addition to all the candidates on your ballot, you've probably seen a bunch of letters and numbers, and those are the ballot measures. So California has a lot of different ballot measures because there's two different ways they can get to the ballot. One of them is by petition. So you may have seen people at the supermarket or at the farmer's market or just at a political event with a clipboard asking for your signature. So that is the initiative process where anybody, any organization, any corporation can write a law, get signatures, and then
they're just talking about some candidates here, you know.
Okay, whoever
I
is
want to hear what
speaking,
they have
can
to
you
say
mute
about the
yourself?
measures and the,
Whoever is
Nikki,
speaking, please mute yourself so we can only hear the person who's actually supposed to be informing us. Thank you.
Okay. So as I was saying, there are some ballot measures and propositions that are placed on a ballot by signature gathering. And then there are also ballot measures that are placed on a ballot by a city council or the state legislature. So for example, anything that changes a previous ballot measure has to go to a new vote. And also, any kind of tax or bond also has to be sent to a vote. So those are often things that the legislature will put on the ballot. And here in the East Bay, the ballot measures are given alphabet letters. So for example, this year we have things like Measure X, Measure Y, Measure Z, Measure AA, BB, CC, DD, EE, and so on and so on. The letters are not repeated within the same county. That's why there are so many different ones. And then the state propositions are given numbers. And the numbers reset every several years. And so if you're looking up information for a proposition, make sure that what you're looking at is for this year's version of that number, because those numbers do get recycled. And we've been through a long enough time period that there's a lot of stuff on the internet from previous numbers. So that's the long and short of it.
Okay, do I need to, raise your hand if you have a question about this. Okay, so now everybody here is an expert on this. And, I do a fair amount of signature gathering, as do people. When somebody's asking you for a signature, please don't walk by them. This really helps things get on the ballot.
Yeah, at the same time, you should also, when you look at the signatures, look at the bottom or middle of the page where it should say who the top funders are. Because not all petition campaigns are good ones. There are some that are mostly volunteer run or backed by labor unions, but there are also a lot of them that are backed by corporations. So yeah, as Susanna says, always follow the money. Yeah, one of the things with propositions is that unlike candidates who have strict contribution limits on how much money a candidate can take, there are no contribution limits for ballot measures. And not only that, nonprofit organizations are allowed to contribute to ballot measure campaigns.
Okay, I think we're ready to start hearing from people about all these things that are on the ballot. The first person we're going to hear from is JP Sahi, who is actually also running for office for school board in New Haven. She's been in New Haven 20 years or so. She's had children in the school. She's been active in the community out there, especially in areas related to the school. And she's running, unfortunately, against some right-wing people. And I'm sure she can bring that up as she discusses it. And she's going to talk about a bond that they've got going out there. JP, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I don't know if you guys can see my flyer, JP Sahi. If you come through Union City, Hayward, you'll see my purple signs. I'm running for an open seat. We do have 2 other candidates, and I am the only endorsed candidate from OREB and also from all the different Democratic clubs. So I'm proud to have that. I'm also on the committee for Measure N, and the committee chair, Shirley, was going to come and join, but she had another, it's political season, so she had another event to attend. So I'm here talking on behalf of Measure N. N as in Nancy in New Haven Unified, and it's a local school board measure to upgrade and renovate the school facilities. It's for 272 million, where the schools will be, is for aging infrastructure. And the bond will, it's an opportunity to modernize our facilities, improve. So with that, we would improve the student health, safety, and campus security, and attract high quality teachers and staff, which are very important. And this measure, if I believe it's Prop 2 also gets approved on the ballot, then we would be getting matching funds. We would qualify for that if this school bond is passed, and that is 272 million just for this school bond, and then we would get some matching funds from the state. Anyone who's been down here in Union City has probably been to James Logan High School. It's you know, a 20+ year old facility. We have over 3,000 students there, and a lot of hodgepodge has been done, and this would bring a state-of-the-art high school to Union City, among many other things. So folks do ask what is, you know, you have other measures. So Measure M as in Mary, is kind of going away. And so it's nothing that would add too much to property taxes. So we would have one measure going away and then the other one coming in. So it's about the same amount, similar amount on property taxes. So if anyone has any questions, we do have a committee on Measure N. You can field the questions either to me, or I can forward you to Shirley or one of the other chairs for the committee.
Okay.
So yes, on N.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you expect N to pass? What's your feeling on that? I know you want it to, but
Yeah, so I've also been canvassing and dropping literature for it, and everyone understands the facilities and that this goes towards facilities. So I'm hearing a lot of good feedback on it, especially since, you know, it's not really anything too extravagant on the property tax. It would just be one measure going away and another one adding on. Plus, if we can get the state matching funds, then that would, you know, raise the amount of funds that we have from 272 to, you know, potentially a little over, you know, 500 million. So a significant increase.
Oh, okay. Oh, Michael?
You know, I live in Berkeley. Most of these school measure in Berkeley get passed. What about the history in your school district? Do these, what's the past history of passing these funding measures?
Yeah, most of the school funding measures also get passed down in Union City. It has a pretty high rate.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions regarding the measure? Okay, JP, would you like to say anything about your campaign?
Sure. So I'm running for New Haven Unified School District Area 1. It is a pretty competitive race. It's an open seat. We do have a Moms for Liberty candidate, somebody who spoke out at Pinole Glen. Community members know her as a far right. You know, she does in the forum. She has not said anything because these are non-partisan races. It's not coming out, but her policies are, she does not believe in rights for all students. There's discussion from her campaign about book banning and putting more restrictions on curriculum. So it is a very serious race, and I'm out there campaigning every day, and it's been a good campaign season. So hopefully, you know, our campaign will prevail.
What is the name of that group again?
Moms for Liberty.
Moms
For Liberty.
for Liberty, okay. I think I've asked that before, because I hadn't heard of it before.
Yeah, they're part of
That's
the,
a nationwide group, I believe, isn't it?
correct, and they're now coming into these local school races in Hayward. So Pinole, they were part of the whole LGBT flag issue and the recall that happened there. And that we have one candidate in my race, and I think there's a couple in the Hayward race too. So they're coming into our local smaller cities.
Yeah, well, they're going to be in more cities then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
San Ramon, yes, they're in San Ramon.
Yeah. That is really frightening. Okay, anything else on NN? Okay, well, thank you very much, JP. Appreciate you putting your time in. I know you could be out going door to door right now.
Yeah, thank you, Carol, for inviting me to talk
Yeah.
about it. Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna hear from some people that live in Contra Costa next, and Sherry Johansson's gonna introduce them. Sherry?
Thanks, Carol. I'm delighted to have Jamin Pursell with us today. He is a longtime Richmond resident, and Richmond has two competing measures on their ballot concerning ranked choice voting. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I get kind of confused on how ranked choice voting, if I'm for it, I'm against it, what are the problems with it, what are the enhancements. Jamin has worked in his community tirelessly for especially LGBTQ issues and the environment. He's president of the West County Dems. He's on the board for Sierra Club, and we are delighted to have him talk about this issue and how it will affect Richmond. Jamin?
Hi, how is everybody? Well, one, I would like to say thank you for inviting me. I was endorsed by Our Revolution when I ran, and I really appreciate the work that you guys do. So we have two different ballot measures. We have L and J, and you know, I think one of the things about this is entirely about trying to change how our elections are done here in the city of Richmond. So a few years back, we had districts implemented, and one thing that I think that the people who are really business focused, Chevron candidates, things like that, they realized that that kind of broke up a lot of their power block. So they've put two competing, there's one measure that they put forward, and then there's been another measure that was put forward, that is the runoff voting or ranked choice voting. So I actually have a slide deck of why measure J is awful. I'm wondering, can I share that? Because I love visuals.
Absolutely.
I'm that person. And then I can talk about ranked choice voting, which and clarify some stuff. So, alrighty. This is this one. Cool. All right. So, put some of those college years of presentations to work. So, no on ranked choice voting, or I'm sorry, no on Measure J, to be clear. Measure J, basically what it does is it creates a primary system for the city of Richmond. So our elections would have, instead of just being at the general, would move to the primary. Now, I know everybody here is probably very sophisticated in politics, and so they know that, like in California, we have moved our primaries. So we have a shifting primary depending on whether it's presidential or midterm year. It can sometimes happen in March, or sometimes it will happen in June. And what would happen is at these primaries, it would try to narrow down the candidates to two candidates. And this is because they're amongst the conservatives, they've determined that if there's only two people running, progressives always lose. And so that was the primary thing that they were trying to do, is create these primaries to narrow down the field so hopefully their candidates could get through. But even more so, there's even worse, if there is only two candidates and they get over 50, any candidate gets over 50%, that candidate automatically wins, and they are not on the general election. So as well, there's some stuff about how if there's council vacancies. Oh, sorry.
Well,
Oh,
yeah, everybody needs to mute. Hey, Michael, if you make me a co-host, I'll watch that for you.
sorry. So there's some things about how the vacancies would be filled, but mostly that's about they want to take it out of the hands of the city council to fill vacancies and put it into elections. So let's go to some stats. So like year over year, we always are seeing that there's about a third less voters in the primaries than there is in the general. And we can see it like going back to 2018. I was digging through, really looking at the numbers here, and we have this dramatic shortfall from voters in the primaries. As well as a more physical, more easy to read variants, we can see that there's this like huge drop. And what's really important to see here is that as well, not only do the midterms as in general have a lower turnout, but this is actually the midterms are where our mayor is elected. So they're reducing the pool, and then because of the primary system, reducing that pool of voters even further. So this is also something I created, is a heat map, and this is about the city of Richmond elections, and this is going year over year. So every year we see that there's the more yellow tones are higher turnout, and more towards purple where there's very low turnout based on the number of voters within the precinct. And so we can see in 2018, again, the primaries, very low turnout. In presidential election 2020, higher turnout on the general, but very much much lower in the primary. And again, in 2022, higher turnout in the general, lower in the primary. And so we can see just year over year, the difference. And then why, again, I'm trying to visualize here is that we, on the 2018, 2022, that's when our mayor's elected. That is when our mayor's elected, which is like a very, very important role. And we have the lower turnout during these primaries, during these midterm years, over and over. So getting even more into it, we can see even more what the drop is between that. And I broke it down into these districts because this is one of the things that districts has done, is that because it's clustered people together, there's supposed to be about 18 to 20,000 people within those districts. But at the same time, the voter registration is not the same. And the demographics really influence how they vote. We have, unfortunately, very low registration of voters amongst Black and Brown communities. And in particular, what I really found startling was that actually 2 districts pretty much determine almost 50% of all of our elections. And so, but even in that case, we still see that there's almost like, again, a third drop every time in each of these districts. And it's remarkable that they found like the way to be able to essentially disenfranchise people by not requiring ID cards, not requiring tests, but instead just trying to make it find that moment that's the most inconvenient possible and try to push all of the power to be decided there. And then kind of just going back, there's 2 sections of town that we see over and over having the highest turnout, and that is Point Richmond and the May Valley area, which are predominantly wealthy, white, homeowner, and older. And it's just, they're really taking a lot of that power and putting it into a concentrated hands. Some of the other issues we have, voter fatigue, because especially on these March primaries during the presidential years, you are going to have to start fundraising months beforehand, right? If you're going to run an election, but you are running that full election because you got to make it to that primary. That means that, with it in March and the ballots going out in February, people are going to have to start fundraising in September, October of the previous year. And that is just going to lead to this exhausting, never-ending election cycle. There's no break here. There's no rest. There is just constant bombardment. And who can do that best but corporate sponsor candidates? But even more so, we've already seen that the people who put it forward had the strategy of this two candidate system, which is what will allow them to be elected to these primaries rather than going to the general. And we look at District 5 election, that's Sue Wilson and Ahmad Anderson right now. So there was actually another candidate earlier, his name was Daniel Heiss, and he actually was told to drop out of the race. And it was all amongst they held like a vote amongst the Chamber of Commerce to decide who should drop out, whether it should be Ahmad or Daniel. Like, they basically made the decision for the voters of who the candidate should be to run against Sue, rather than just allowing them to run. And so they manipulated this young man who had never been in Richmond politics. And I mean, I don't support him for a number of other reasons, but like mostly it was just very startling how they were already manipulating our elections to be able to try and see if this theory they have of if two candidates run, progressives lose. And last but not least, of course, there's going to be like, we can look at the cost of it. So having a primary is going to be expensive, not just for the candidates, because they're going to essentially have to run two campaigns, but also it's going to be very expensive for the city, because now we're going to have this concentrated effort around our primary system, rather than just what we typically see across the state, which is county, state, federal things on the primary. There's only about like, I believe 2 or 3% of California cities that actually vote on a primary system for city council. And those are generally like bedroom communities that are very wealthy, like Santa Barbara and a couple other places. But overall, it's considered generally a bad practice because of the lower turnout of voters, and as well because of systematic issues of what suppresses votes, such as income levels, racial disparities, and background disparities. So in general, this has just like been this horrific thing that will pretty much turn the city council very strongly over to our to the corporate backed candidates. These are also, I just because I again love numbers. When we look at it, the people that are putting this forward are the Richmond Police Officers Association. Their PAC put 90,000 into it. Plumbers, Boilermakers, IBU, carpenters, operating engineers, and then there's this developer that put in 30 grand who is known for having dumped contaminated soil in our community multiple times. He's like he is like the classic case of terrible developer. And so they have all been working together, and this seems to be kind of launched out of an anger about Point Melati, an anger about the lack of development in AstraZeneca. And so that is how these unions kind of got involved, is that like they look at that as work. Even if it is bad development, they don't care. They still need work, which I can appreciate. I am pro-union. However, bad housing is never the option, in my opinion. And then I wanted to point out we have two candidates. Both of them have been endorsed by Rich PAC, the business associate, the Chambers PAC that they have, which is Ahmad Anderson and Sean Dunning, who have backed this, and they like to tell people, oh, well, 10,000 people have signed on to this, and that's how they got it on the ballot, and we should listen to this citizens. But over and over and over, we heard that when this ballot was actually presented to people, it was going to do everything under the sun that would convince somebody to sign, from hiring more police officers, to saving our schools, to funding our streets. I mean, it was going to do anything that could possibly convince somebody. So, and then we have countless like anecdotes of people saying that they had a terrible experience trying to figure out what the ballot measure was actually trying to present to them. So, that said, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and let's talk about what the other option is. The other option is ranked choice voting. Now, if you don't know what ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting is, essentially it's that instead of having to vote for one person, you vote for a few people based off of the number of candidates, and it allows you to have a broader idea of who your candidate is. One of the bigger benefits, I believe, of this is that it allows people to say, okay, this is my the candidate I love, but I would also be okay with this other person. And it allows for people to feel like they have a greater buy-in in elections. Particularly why I think this was brought forward was that there was this complaint that, oh, over 50% of the city didn't vote for our Mayor Eduardo. Now, of course, they don't want to admit that, in fact, Mayor Eduardo actually got more individual votes than when Tom Butt was elected, because let's not count people, let's just do an aggregated percentage for some reason. And then as well, you know, they want to say that everybody should have a buy-in, right? But like they also ignore the fact that it's on a primary, a midterm year, where these votes were happening. And so, you know, already we have a lower turnout from our city. So we were, whether we say this idea of 50% of the city of Richmond is already kind of actually, I do have a heat map for the 2024 primary. And I will let, if anybody would like to, actually I can pull it up on my, because I have it hosted on my website. One of the other benefits I think of ranked choice voting is that it really gets away from the idea of being able to demonize people. Like, this is something that the other side has really taken advantage of, which is that you just scare the hell out of people and say that they're going to keep defunding the police, that they're, you know, trying to get rid of social, I don't know, like they say a bunch of nonsense, like they're killing business. They say all these things, like the RPA has been created turned into this horrific monster because they just blame everything for them. They blame them for the bad weather. And it's just, but with ranked choice voting, what you have to do is you have to actually show that you have a wider platform, that you have to actually, bring people in, because if you're not going to be their first person, you might want to be their second person or their third person. Here, let me just show you real quick, because somebody asked in the chat what the heat map for 2024 is. And again, so kind of similar to what we saw in the presentation. Again, the point is where a lot of the votes happen, as well up in the May Valley area, and you can actually click on it. And anybody who is interested to see what this heat map, it is on jaminpursell.com. And I've been trying to build it out more. I'm trying to do this with other cities as well. Some cities are not quite as dramatic. I did it for Pinole, and it was, you know, they only have about 20,000 voters, so it wasn't quite as dramatic. But we have been working on this algorithm, program that is that was started actually by Nick Spiner, and tried to really kind of put together some way to visualize where are the concentrated of voters, and also try to hopefully kind of see where we could best turn out where voters are, and also target areas that have low voter registration, so that we know that's where we can actually get people registered. That's where people that are being like left out of the system is. But going back to ranked choice voting, I just want to say, like, not only does it have a greater buy-in, not only does it allow for more civil discourse within our politics, but I'm from Alaska, and if not for ranked choice voting, we would never have had the first Native Alaskan representative on the federal level. And while she maybe is not the most progressive, as I would hope, she's very progressive for Alaska. And I think that when people have the ability to choose from a menu and try to really find a number of people, it allows for a wider discourse in our politics. And I think it allows for people to feel more involved and be able to get involved, because that way then they don't feel like, well, I don't agree with either of these two people, or I don't agree with any of these people. They don't feel like they can just pull back. They feel like, oh, well, I can agree with a little bit of this person, a little bit of that person, and I think it allows for people to have to find people who are going to be able to connect with them on various issues. So I think that's the long and short of it. There's a really well-funded campaign against Measure L that is being put forward by the RPOA. I think it's pretty terrible as well that the RPOA is sponsoring this, considering pretty much the people who are policing these areas are going to be the ones trying to take away their vote and their ability to engage in politics here in the city of Richmond. So I just, fundamentally find that problematic. So
I have a question. What is the RPAO that you just mentioned?
Oh, RPO, the Richmond Police Officers Association.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry.
Do you have any other questions? Jamin, that was just a wonderful presentation. Michael.
Can I ask a question about this deal between Chevron and the city of Richmond?
Sure. Yeah.
So, I used to work for Chevron. I know how much crude oil they process. I did a rough calculation. They process 100 million barrels of oil per year, roughly. That means $100 million per year for 10 years. That's $1 billion. That's $1 billion. And the Richmond now only gets 550 million over the next 5 years. Is that right?
No, 10 years.
10 years. 10 years. Okay. It's hard to predict how much crude oil they'll process in the future. But if you take the normal as the next 10 years, there's less money than the city of Richmond got for not having this measure voted on, the ballot measure.
Well,
what do you think? Do you think the city council is afraid, or that it might not pass? Or
okay, I could say that there's and sorry, I want to make sure I get all your questions. So according to the analysis done by the community for what is it? It's not APEN, it was CBE. CBE had determined that what was on average the city was going to actually get was something around about 60 million a year, is what they determined. And that was based off of looking back, I think, at the previous 5 years, because it wasn't just processing, it was about also turning out a final product, I believe. So because they do partial processing for some things, which maybe that's part of that figure that you were talking about, but I'm not quite sure. But I will say that that was, at least in the presentations that I saw from CBE and the information that APEN as well was sharing. So so the difference would have been that, of course, that would have gone indefinitely as opposed to 10 years, and that could have been that could have gone up or down depending on their processing. There was from when I spoke to city council members, one of the things that there was two things that there were major concerns about, that, and it's not about whether it would pass. Everybody was absolutely sure it would pass.
That's right.
The thing was that there was one, Chevron would have sued the city. And if you sue the city, it puts that implementation on hold until the case would be resolved. As we had seen, like literally 2 weeks prior to when they made the deal, like a Trump appointed federal judge had ruled in favor of Chevron already. The general consensus was that, like, very likely they would be able to continue to keep fighting it up. But as soon as you got to the federal level, you suddenly entered into a different pool and different thought process of our future. And a lot of that is because of all of the Trump appointed judges. And so very likely what they anticipated was that it would drag on for many, many years. It would be very, very expensive for the city. And with the general tone, because they did a lot of research into how the federal level had been ruling for individual city environmental policies and measures like this, they kind of made the assertion that, like, there was a very slim chance that in the end they would actually get any of that money, and that it would likely have just cost the city money. They might even have to pay for some of Chevron's legal fees, and it just to add insult to injury. I think there was another point of it too, which was like, Chevron has already been it was already had this other tax, this that was based off of a settlement, and that was set to expire. So already we are going to be getting more money from Chevron because we have Measure U and how that will be affecting them, in addition to this other money. So while they understood that, like, it would be a very strong kind of victory for the city, they were still going to be able to get some more money from Chevron, regardless of what they worked out in that deal, because they were going to let this other deal was going to be expiring. And further, in general, the city council is trying to dig itself out of the debt that was created during the early 2000s. And it's Claudia Jimenez in particular has been working really, really hard to try and get us out of swaps, this horrible, like, interest rate, adjustable interest rate thing for the city that ended up costing us millions, and ended up actually saving the city, I think, $22 million over the next 10 years. And then as well has been working to try and find other mechanisms like Measure U to be able to bring more money into the city. And so with the thought of having a good, it would have been a victory for the city and the people, but it would have, in the long term, harmed the city financially. They had to, her, Eduardo, and Doria all were on the subcommittee with the lawyers, and everybody worked really hard to try and balance the two priorities.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the reasons why this money is going to be going towards environmental justice, diversifying our revenue stream so we're not as reliant on the income of Chevron, and as well towards I'm blanking on the word, the phrase for it, but but trying to support the impacted community that is right next to Chevron, the front line, the fence line community. And so that really became the bigger win, was when they get this money, they really do believe that they're going to be able to put it immediately towards towards those efforts and be able to dig us out of being under the thumb of Chevron that much faster.
Yeah.
And then as well, I will also throw out that Chevron, well, because they're horrible people and they pretty much run on fear, is they said, well, you know what, if we only do, as I mentioned earlier, the partial processing, they talked about that as a strategy. They could just, this doesn't cover partial processing. So we could just partially process, and then we could ship it on a rail or take it overseas and finish that process, and then you get nothing. And they were going to, and they already were articulating how they were going to manipulate their own their own plant to be able to avoid the tax. And you know, it was like they were very bold with their skullduggery. So I think that was really what drove their impetus to settle and get some money, and be able to do something now rather than have to battle it out for the next 10-15 years.
Okay,
Hope that helps.
thank you.
Yeah, it's bitter medicine, but like I feel like I hope that we are able to accomplish the goals of being able to help and support our community that's been so desperately in need for so long. So
In the long run, it may not be a bad deal, because my personal opinion is that if it's tax on the crude oil that's processed, the trend is that there's going to be less and less crude oil processed in the future. Certainly, it's not going to increase. So,
yeah,
you know, who knows? A payment upfront, a decision upfront, may be better than predicting what the future brings.
yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
All
All right, thanks.
No problem. Is there any other questions about
Yeah.
the measures or anything else I can elucidate on?
Jamin, it was really good. You know, Richmond is such an important ally to the progressives, and what has been able to be accomplished in Richmond is so important to us. So this was really, really, I think, very illuminating to all of us of what's going on in Richmond. And you know, we hope we can kind of stick with you guys and support your efforts there, because I know from some of our other dealings that there are a lot of people that are pressuring you and the RPA to go away. So
Yeah, people hate
So-
progress. Some people just like the way things are because it suits them, and it ignores all the other people who are being harmed by it. So
well, we really appreciate you being here. Any other questions? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Thank you so much, Jamin.
thank you.
Carol, I'm just going to go right into Rafael, if that's okay.
Okay,
Um,
absolutely.
He's running for treasurer in Pinole, which is my new neighborhood up here. And he's a detail guy. He knows where the numbers are. He wants to be transparent as far as what the city does with the money and where it goes and who benefits. And he's going to talk to us about Measure I, which is a sales tax that's going to be on the ballot in Pinole, and the benefits and how that will be used in the city of Pinole. Rafael?
Thank you for the introduction, Sherry. Like Sherry said, my name is Rafael Menis. I'm running for Pinole City Treasurer. You can find my website at menisfortreasurer.org. My FPPC ID is 1467612. And speaking as a candidate and as a private person, not as a planning commissioner, I want to be very clear about that. I think that Measure I would be beneficial for the city of Pinole because, frankly, the city needs the money. We are currently facing at least by current finance department estimates, about a $1.6 million deficit, which is going to continue increasing. And without this tax, the city would need to make immediate cuts to various services. The city right now is thinking probably recreation and public safety, things like police and fire. But more broadly, I've also got a couple of charts which show why this is necessary in the longer term. Can I get screen sharing permissions?
I don't know who
Yes,
does that.
I'll get it to you.
Okay.
All right, so you can see three different charts here. And these are all based on the city's sort of long-term financial projection going all the way back from 2018-19 all the way forward in the future to 2044-45. And you can find this in the city's budget. Now, this is all showing if nothing changes, just the city keeps on going as it's going. You can see that we just barely have a surplus this year, and then it drops below the line, and then it keeps on dropping. And the fund balance also drops below zero and keeps on dropping. And the reason for this is primarily two different factors. In the near term, so I'd say between basically now through about 2032, there's the rise in PERS retirement costs, basically the state retirement system, which is needed to increase the amount the cities paid to it because of issues with how they projected their fund balance. But after 2032, our big problem is that number is replaced as the most expensive by our other benefits cost, which basically means medical care, because the city funds retiree healthcare costs. That's one of the reasons why I'm personally in favor of single-payer healthcare. So yeah, if we don't do anything, we have deficits starting, 2045, 46, and then going up and up and up. So this measure, the city estimates, would bring in about $2.5 million a year. So it would buy us about 4 years, assuming everything continues as the city expects it to. There's no major recession. There's not, significant changes in what PERS charges us, or not significant changes in healthcare costs, et cetera. The city's argument also argues that there could be funding going towards more capital projects like road and infrastructure repairs, but I think personally that the city's ongoing cost deficits are going to pretty much eat up all of what this revenue generates. Now, I'd also highlight that this is a general tax measure. That means it needs 50% plus one to pass. It also means that the city can spend it on whatever it feels like. But the city's historically speaking done a pretty good job of spending sales tax measures on what it's said it's going to do in the allocation. But I think it's worth noting that because it's important for people to understand why it's at that threshold and what the city is actually permitted to do with those funds. So I support it. I think people should vote for it. And the city put this on the ballot because in pre-election surveying, 63% of the surveyed voters indicated that they would back it as compared to some other taxes. But it's not going to be enough by itself. Just wanted to be clear about that. Do people have any questions?
Okay, it looks like nobody has any questions about that. I know you're running. Do you want to talk for a minute about your campaign?
Sure. So let's see. I've got a little business card thing here. Let's see whether I can get it to actually show up on the camera or whether it just turns invisible. It just turns invisible. Oh, well. Anyhow, basically, I'm honored to have been endorsed by our Revolution East Bay, the West County Constituted Democratic Club, the Pinole Progressive Alliance, the Democratic Party of Contra Costa County, and the California Democratic Party, because they all think that I'd be able to do a better job at making the city's finances accessible to the community and helping the community hold the city accountable. My opponent, Roy Swearingen, is a Republican still and was a Trump supporter in 2020. I assume that she continues to be a Trump supporter. So, yeah. He says he'd be able to offer a lot of advice to the city about, well, you know what? No, I should be talking more about myself than my opponents. So I'll refrain from that. But I think that my background in looking into the city's finances and work within the city on the Community Service Commission and on the Planning Commission, which I am currently the chair of, make me qualified to explain the city's finances to the community. And I think that, my past experience doing that and my capabilities and my education as a University of Chicago graduate all would make me a good choice for the city of Pinole. So I'd appreciate people's vote.
All right. I don't live there, so I can't vote for you, but I hope the word gets out. Okay, any further questions for Rafael? Okay, thank you so much for coming here. I know today's a day where people are really busy out campaigning. So thanks for being able to take the time to be here with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to my site in the chat for text
Okay, good
convenience.
idea. Okay, now we're moving on to a bigger city. We're going to move on to Oakland, and we're going to hear about what's going on in Oakland from my dear friend Shirley Golub. Shirley has been in politics, as far as I know, forever. Certainly since before I was. She's very, very strong progressive. I know the past year or so, she's put a huge amount of energy into supporting Pamela Price. And one other thing I'd like to say about her, she's a wonderful dog mom. Okay, Shirley, go ahead.
Yes, so forgive my indulgence should you hear barking in the background, because the Blue Angels are trying to do things today despite the clouds, and dogs do react to jets. Anyway, Oakland has 3 ballot measures that I'd like to briefly summarize for you. And there are also 2 recall issues that are affecting Oakland's voters. And of course, our mayor, Sheng Thao, is on the ballot to be recalled. And a few days ago, Barbara Lee and several other Democratic folks decided finally that they would speak out and say, Barbara Lee went on Twitter and said recalls are, number one, chaotic, number one, they are costly, and give the folks a chance to do what they were elected to do. And if as long as they don't commit some horrendous crime, let them finish their term. And if you don't like their work, there's always the next election to remove them. So that statement and those sentiments apply both to Mayor Sheng Thao and also to our Alameda County District Attorney, Pamela Price, who I hope will join us shortly. There's a African-American civil rights event happening this afternoon. It started at 3:00, and I believe DA Price is being honored and speaking at that event, but I hope she'll make it before we finish so she can actually speak to all the latest developments. As far as the measures that Oakland voters are going to be voting on besides the 2 recalls, the first is actually just a measure that's part of Oakland. It's called Measure MM. Mem is a Mary, M is a Mary. And it's a special tax for 20 years in the wildfire prevention zone, which is defined in the measure. Now, I've been waiting and waiting for our booklet on local measures and local candidates, the statements. It still has not come, and I don't know if it's going to come tomorrow or not, but if not, I'm going to trot on down to the registrar of voters and see if they have copies, because, you know, it's several days since my ballot has come, and I'm always hot to trot once I get it. This measure is only in the wildfire prevention zone, and I found a very nice picture of the wildfire prevention zone, and, well, you can probably go get it yourself. If you go to the Oakland side article that came out just a couple of days ago on the 7th, it's, as you would imagine, in the hills. And the ballot covers not only vegetation management, but prevention plans such as goats, which is one of my favorite ways of taking care of vegetation other than Roundup. And I hope there's going to be citizen oversight and audits, because this is for 20 years. And each single family parcel within this swath along the hills will be charged $99 per parcel. And condominiums or multifamily units, each one will be charged $65 as a parcel tax. And it should generate in the next year $2.67 million. And as I said, there will be citizens oversight, and there will be cost of living increases to, you know, continue making sure that this is working properly. There are exemptions for seniors. There are exemptions for low-income folks in these areas. So it sounds like a lot of people have put a lot of thought into how to manage this particular issue. And I think I'm going to vote yes on it for sure, because with climate change, we are definitely concerned about wildfire spreading. Everyone remembers 1989, and hopefully that will not happen again. The next one after Mary Mary comes Nancy Nancy. And this one I've actually gotten a beautiful brochure on, 4 pages. And this comprehensive plan is really about safety. And it was not developed by the city council or mayor. It was developed by a coalition of Oakland community leaders. The Oakland League of Women Voters has reviewed and endorsed this measure, NN, and they really are focusing on increasing 9/11 response times, additional community police officers, enhanced intervention programs to reduce gun violence, and focus on the violent crime that has been happening since COVID came along, and maybe before. And of course, they want to have programs that would have job training and education, graduation assistance, and particularly mental health services. And one of the things that I love on the back are various community members that have supported this, besides the usual folks. So Joanna is someone we all know. She's listed as someone who supports this. Tanya Love, Pamela Drake, Jennifer Ziliak, and many other people running for office, such as Charlene Wang. And there are people that, you know, of course, I don't love, like Brenda Grisham. Don't tell anybody I said that. But she too has supported this. So it's really an issue that is very important for the safety and well-being of Oakland citizenry, and probably the surrounding areas as well. So, you know, there is, of course, a website, and if you go to oaklanderstogether.com, you can get a full list of the endorsers. So I'm voting yes on NN. And the final measure for Oakland is very vague to me. So this is OO, next in line after MM and NN. It amends the city charter to revise qualifications for service and removal procedures. And it says it will specify the vote threshold for action and increase minimum staffing requirements for the Public Ethics Commission. I reached out to District 4 Councilmember Janani Ramachandran because she, in the past, was on the Public Ethics Commission. And I don't know if their staffing requirements are good or bad at this moment in time. But I thought, she might have an opinion, but I haven't heard back from her yet. Oakland Rising has reviewed this and says that this is something that we need. And also I received a Alameda County Dems postcard, and they are also voting yes on this measure as well, recommending a yes vote, as well as MM and NN. So sounds like it's pretty easy for Oakland this time. Sometimes we get a lot of measures like Berkeley has this time, but this time it's just 1, 2, 3. So a triple yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shirley.
Any questions?
Would anybody like to ask questions about any of this?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for jumping in at the last minute on this. And, we'll bother you for more information on these if we need. Okay, thank you so much. We're going to move on now to another city. We're going to move now to Berkeley. And the majority of the Berkeley stuff is going to be presented by Soli Alpert, who is currently vice chair of the Berkeley Rent Board. He's done amazing things in Berkeley for years and years and years in bringing people together. I know his future is going to keep growing in Berkeley. Anyway, and he's going to cover, I think, most of the Berkeley measures, although Alfred is going to step in on one of them. And it looks like the person is not here who is going to talk about the animal rights. So could you throw that in, Soli, also?
Sure.
Okay,
I
all
will
right.
try.
Go
And
for
hello,
it.
everyone. Thank you for those very kind words, Carol. Making me sound old
Oh, you're
with those years and years and years. We have a dozen measures on the Berkeley ballot, so I am going to go quickly through them. Luckily, most of them are, I would say, fairly non-controversial. In fact, the first 5 are all non-controversial yeses. And I'm not going to share my screen because it's just a list of them. Measure W is the first Berkeley measure. It is a measure that renews what had been Measure P. So in 2018, I think it was 2018, Berkeley passed Measure P and Measure O. Measure O is a bond measure to fund affordable housing. Measure P was an increase in the transfer tax on real property, so the tax when you sell a building. And it was only on the top third of property sales. So the top third of the most expensive property sales in the city paid an extra tax, and that tax was to help fund homeless services and homeless housing. Measure W renews that tax. That tax is set to expire in 2026. Measure W would eliminate the sunset on the tax and increase it a little bit. So pretty much everyone is in favor of that. It's essential for funding homeless services in the city of Berkeley. Measure X is the Library Relief Act. It helps pay for libraries in Berkeley. Very important. Another one that pretty much everyone is in favor of. Measure Y is the Parks, Trees, and Landscaping Maintenance Tax Amendments. This renews the city's tax, existing tax that helps fund our parks and trees and maintenance. And then Measure Z, the last one, is another tax renewal. This renews the city of Berkeley's sugar sweetened beverage tax, our soda tax. Another new tax, just keeping the one we currently have in place. And then measure 5, this isn't even a tax measure. You all may have heard of this, the GAN limit, GANN. Our state constitution, which is incredibly stupid, requires that cities get permission from their voters to spend the money they've already raised from taxes that have already been approved. This is required every certain number of years. It's dumb. It shouldn't be required, but we have to do it. And so, you know, it should pass, hopefully uncontroversially. So those are all of the kind of first uncontroversial measures. Then we get into measure BB and measure CC, which our revolution has already taken a position on formally, and Alfred is going to help explain these with me. You can see there the sign for measure BB. So it's yes on measure BB for a better Berkeley, and no on measure CC to stop the corporate con. Measure BB started as Alfred, you want to jump in?
Sure. So the background, Berkeley has pretty good rent control, but it doesn't quite cover everybody. And sometimes there's also enforcement issues. And that was the reason that this year the rent board identified what some of those loopholes and issues were and wrote a ballot measure to fix them. They first tried to go through the city council, but the city council wasn't interested. And so it was decided to do a petition campaign, which many of us worked on. The petition campaign, because it started fairly late, we did not get enough signatures. And so to qualify for this year, we did have a pass to 2026. And we were able to use that as a bargaining chip with the city council this time, where we got most of what we wanted. Not quite everything, but we got a few big things. They included expanding the tenant protections and rent control to the senior housing, the affordable housing, because some of them have been dealing with a lot of issues with their property management companies. So that's one. And number 2 is what's called the right to organize. The right to organize is similar to a labor union, where let's say the landlord's not fixing the roof, or the heat doesn't work, or the water's not working. So you get half the people in your building to form a tenants union, and now you have collective bargaining rights, where the landlord is required to meet with you to work on solving these problems. This one was something that the UAW union, which represents a lot of students and academic workers on campus, have really been fighting for, because they have all kinds of issues on some of the older buildings near campus that they live in. There were also a few other fixes. One of them included lowering the maximum rent increase each year, which is based on inflation, but with a hard cap. Currently, that hard cap is 7%, which can be a lot, especially because when the increase is that high, it's because inflation is high and everything else is getting expensive at the same time. So BB would lower that cap to 5%. And then there's a few other things around utilities, around late rent, and other issues. But all in all, it's a very good tenant protection ballot measure. And we urge everybody to support. Now, of course, the landlords aren't going to take this sitting down. And so they created what's called Measure CC, the corporate con. The Measure CC was written to sound kind of similar, especially to confuse people, both during the signature gathering phase, as well as currently during the election phase. But the reason we are telling people to vote no on CC is that it pretty much does the opposite of what BB does. It takes rights away from sitting tenants. It allows rent to go up as much as 7.1% a year. And it also takes money away from our existing rent relief and affordable housing program and puts it into a slush fund that goes directly to landlords. So yes on BB for better Berkeley, no on CC to stop the corporate con. And we were assigned letter BB, and so Leah Simon-Weisberg came up with this great idea of having bees be part of our logo. And if you see her around Berkeley, you might see her in a bee costume.
Awesome. And so that's BB and CC. which are one of two kind of paired ballot measures in Berkeley. If you have any
Right.
other questions
So do
about
you want to
those.
explain what that means when you have paired
Oh
measures?
yes, so BB and CC, and then we'll talk later about EE and FF, both contain override provisions. So only one of them can succeed because they amend the same part of the law. So if both BB and CC get a majority of the vote, whichever one gets more votes passes and the other one does not. If neither of them get a majority, nothing happens. If one gets a majority, that one passes. If both get a majority, whichever one has more votes is successful. Next up is DD, Measure DD, which is a prohibition on concentrated animal feeding operations initiative. Basically, this bans concentrated animal feeding operations called CAFOs, basically factory farms. So an animal rights group gathered signature to put this on the ballot in Berkeley. It no longer really will have any practical effect. The only CAFO we had in Berkeley was the horse racing track that we share with Albany. But that's since closed. So at this point, it's not going to do any harm necessarily, but it won't have any actual impact.
Could I make a comment on that?
Yeah.
It will prevent any more from coming on in the future.
That's true. Yeah. So it prevents any new ones from opening as well.
So because of that, I do support it.
Measure EE and Measure FF are two competing tax measures that fund street repair, sidewalk safety and street repair in Berkeley. There are I would say there are progressives on both sides of the issue, but in general, I am strongly in favor of FF. So the difference, basically, the history here, in 2022, there was a bond measure put on the ballot by the City Council, Measure L, which funded sidewalk and street repair and safety issues, some infrastructure issues, and some housing issues. That was a special tax, and so it required 2/3, and it did not hit that. It got 50%, but not 66%. In the aftermath of the failure of Measure L, people who had been opposed and supporting Measure L came together and came up with Measure FF, which had some reforms that addressed some of the complaints that some of the people who opposed Measure L initially had. And so about half of the people who opposed Measure L now are supporting Measure FF. And Measure FF is kind of the big difference between Measure EE and Measure FF is around pedestrian and bicycle safety. So Measure FF places in a particular importance on funding streets along our bicycle boulevards, funding improvements to our streets and sidewalks that will protect pedestrians, funding bicycle infrastructure like safe bicycle tracks and protected bike lanes. Measure EE is also a smaller tax, and Measure FF is a split roll tax. So Measure FF charges a smaller amount for residential property and a higher amount for commercial property. Measure EE funds the same amount for everyone, regardless. And in general, I think that Measure FF is large enough to actually fund our need. I don't believe Measure EE will raise enough money to cover the needs we have for street and sidewalk repair. And Jenny Wong, our city auditor, feels the same way. Jenny wrote the audit that showed that we have a real crisis with our streets funding in Berkeley, and she's supporting Measure FF as well. But like I said, there are some disagreements here. I think I'm pretty comfortable saying that streets and sidewalks and pedestrian safety are a progressive issue, and so for that reason, I'm definitely in favor of Measure FF. The last two measures on the ballot are two that were written and gathered signatures for by the City Employees Union, SEIU 10-1. Measure GG is an ordinance that will tax natural gas use in larger buildings and help pay for climate resiliency retrofits, especially for low-income folks and small businesses, low-income tenants, and seniors. So that one is definitely something we're in favor of. I think we've endorsed it already. I don't know. And then Measure HH is another measure that was introduced by the cities union. It puts a mandate for the city to increase air quality standards for city buildings indoors. So there's a big issue post-COVID with air quality in city buildings. Workers are still consistently getting sick with COVID. And I keep on seeing, I feel like every few months I see a study that's like, oh, this government or this school district or this such and such place improved their indoor air quality and health went up and productivity went up and the test scores of kids went up. Basically, indoor air quality is a huge public health issue throughout our community, Measure HH will put a requirement that city increases its indoor air quality for city buildings, which will benefit both city workers by keeping them safe and healthy, and also the public because they'll be safe and healthy, but also because city workers will be more efficient and effective in doing their work. So those are all the dozen measures on the Berkeley ballot.
Okay, I have a question on the last one. Will that affect schools?
No, I don't believe so. So the
schools are all-
BUSD is its own system. Measure HH is specifically about City of Berkeley facilities.
Yeah, because it seems like if the air quality was better in the schools, there'd be a lot less sick kids.
I agree. I definitely think, we'll see how Measure HH goes. I do think, personally, I'm glad that this only covers the city right now. The city finances are in a little bit of a better place than the school district's finances. And so the city is in a better position to fund this kind of work. Once this is done with the city, I would definitely be in favor of looking at the school district implementing that, especially if we can find some funding sources.
And I have another question on EEFF. And so if both of them pass, the one that gets the most votes is the one that happens, right? What are the chances of both or either of them passing, do you think?
I think that FF is more likely to pass. FF is endorsed by a pretty wide coalition. It's endorsed by the Democratic Party, the Labor Council, I believe. I don't think that EE has any organizational endorsements other than kind of the organizations that put it on the ballot. Measure FF is also endorsed by a majority of the city council, majority of all the school board members, a majority of, or not quite a majority of the rent board commissioners. And they have more money that they're spending on the election.
Okay. Michael, did I see your hand up?
Well, my question is just like yours, so EE and FF have the same relationship as DD and EE. I mean, CC and DD.
BB and CC are the paired, and then EE and FF.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so it's the two tenant protection measures, or rather, the tenant protection measure and the tenant farming measure, and then the two streets funding measures are paired.
Okay, any more questions about all this stuff in Berkeley? Okay, Soli, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We always appreciate hearing from you.
Absolutely, thank you for having me as always.
Okay, we are going to move on to the one that affects everybody in the state. And we're going to hear from Alfred Twu about quite a few. I think there's 7 or 8, I don't remember, different things that are going to be on the ballot. 10? Okay, go for it, Alfred.
Yeah, so this year
bring your drawings?
Yeah, I will bring up the drawings.
Okay.
You need to make me a co-host though.
Michael, can you make him a co-host?
I think you have now.
Okay.
All right, do y'all see it?
Okay.
Carol, can you see the pictures?
Yep.
Great. Hi everyone, I'm Alfred, here to talk to you about the 2024 California propositions. We have 10 of them this year, which is about the amount we normally have, actually. There's always a lot. Half of them, the one was the single digit numbers 2 through 6, were placed on the ballot by our state legislature. And the other half, 32, 33, 34, 35, and 36, were put on the ballot by signature gathering. So we'll go through them one at a time. So Prop 2 is a statewide bond for schools and community colleges. As JP Sahi mentioned earlier, a lot of schools need a lot of work, and this money would be used to match funding from individual cities and school districts to either repair existing facilities or build new ones. Pretty straightforward. The Democratic Party supports this one. Prop 3, it's to protect marriage equality. So those of you who've been around for a while may remember in 2008 when Proposition 8 of that year passed, which banned same-sex marriage. That was later overturned in the courts. However, right now, with the Republican-controlled Supreme Court, there's that risk that they may overturn the previous overturn, which would cause same-sex marriage to be banned again in California. So we don't want that to happen. So Prop 3 guarantees the right to not just same-sex, but also interracial marriage in the state constitution, just in case the US Supreme Court removes federal rights. Okay, Proposition 4, you may have heard of this one as the climate bond or the environmental bond. So climate change, it's here. And this helps us adapt to a lot of the impacts. Similar to Prop 2, this is a $10 billion bond for the whole state. It includes money for flood control, drinking water, preventing wildfires, protecting the coast, the wildlife, parks, farms, and also helping cities adapt to extreme heat, whether that's the providing of cooling centers or retrofitting buildings. Okay, Proposition 5. So this one makes it easier for local governments to fund affordable housing, infrastructure, and other public facilities, whether it's a library, fire station, or anything else your city might build. So right now, if a city wants to pass a bond measure for any of these things, they need 2/3 of the voters to vote yes. And that's hard. We tried to get some money for housing and infrastructure in Berkeley a couple years ago. We got 59% of the vote, which was a pretty strong majority, but not 2/3. And so now our streets are falling apart and we don't have enough affordable housing. So Prop 5 helps fix that. It changes the threshold for passing a local bond measure to 55%. So easy to remember, 5, 55. Prop 6 and slavery. You may be wondering, why are we still needing to vote on this? Well, currently, slavery is still allowed in prisons, and there's definitely still forced labor going on. So Prop 6 would put an end to that. All right, so now we're on to the 5 propositions that were put on a ballot by signature. The first one is Prop 32. This one raises the minimum wage to $18 by 2026. And then after that, it raises it to match inflation. Prop 33 is the one about rent control. What it does is it gives cities and counties the ability to expand rent control and other tenant protections. So right now, there's a state law called Costa-Hawkins that says that cities are not allowed to extend rent control to detached houses or to any newer buildings. So Prop 33 would repeal Costa-Hawkins, and then it would be up to each city to pass additional local protections. Okay, and Prop 34 is probably the most complicated measure, but it's actually pretty straightforward when you get down to what it does. Prop 34 bans exactly one organization, AIDS Healthcare Foundation, from funding ballot measures. And the reason this measure exists is that AHF has funded Prop 33, the rent control measure. And so the landlords aren't happy with that. And so the landlords funded Prop 34, which would prevent AHF from funding anything else in the future if 34 were to pass. Okay, Prop 35, it maintains a certain source of healthcare funding. Right now in California, to help fund the Medi-Cal low-income healthcare program, there's a tax on health insurance companies that money is then matched with federal money and then goes back to hospitals and health plans that actually provide the healthcare. And finally, there is Proposition 36. This one increases the prison sentences for certain crimes having to do with drugs or theft. However, it's what we call an unfunded mandate, where there isn't any new money being provided. There's no tax attached to this proposition. And so if there's going to end up being more people in prison for longer, that's money that's going to have to come from somewhere else, such as existing public safety programs. All right, so where do the parties stand on the propositions? The Democrats support all the props except for 34 and 36. The Democratic Party did not take a position on 34 and is opposed to Prop 36. The Republican Party skipped or stayed neutral on a lot of the propositions, but the Republicans oppose housing, they oppose minimum wage increases, rent control, but the Republicans do support more prisons as well as restrictions on AHF, which was Prop 34. And the Republicans are actually aligned with the Democrats on Prop 35, mostly because it doesn't really change much, it just maintains an existing funding program. And finally, who's paying for these propositions? This year, there's actually not as much money in the propositions as there were the last couple of cycles, but as you can see, the Apartment Association, which represents landlords, are the single largest funder of propositions. They're opposed to the rent control measure, and they're also the ones funding the entirety of Prop 34. All right, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, on the slavery in prisons. So I'm a little confused about the Republicans. They're confusing people. Why they didn't just say no or yes? Why? What would the point be of not commenting? Because they seem to like people in prison.
Right, I think the Republican Party just didn't want it to come out on a record saying they were pro-slavery.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
they decided not to take a position.
Michael.
Can you are these slides proprietary, or can you send copies?
Yeah, I will drop the link in the chat. You can also see the link here. It is tinyurl.com/2024 props.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions on these or on anything else that we've discussed tonight? Or comments? Okay, I love your drawings, Alfred. You're so talented.
So Alfred can draw about anything.
I know, I love it.
I agree. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, in the past, I've also done it for local measures, but I'm pretty busy this year. So.
Do you want to
Amazing.
say, Alfred is running for an office. Do you want to say anything about your campaign?
Sure. Yeah, running for the rent board as part of the tenant slate, along with Dominique Walker, who works in affordable housing's co-founded Moms for Housing, Xavier Johnson, who's a tenants' rights attorney, Avery Arbog, who's a labor commissioner and student organizer, and I'm an architect and planning commissioner. So we're all committed to making housing more affordable, strengthening our tenant protections, and making sure that everyone has a place to live.
Okay, any questions of Alfred or of any of the other candidates that are still here? Okay, I think that brings an early end, yay, to our meeting. Usually we go over, and tonight we're a little short. It looks like Pamela Price is not gonna make it. I thought she'd be here an hour ago if she was gonna be able to come. Anyway, okay. Very big thanks to everybody who made presentations and helped the rest of us understand what all these things are that we're going to be voting on. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Thank you for all the new people that came. I see a few names out there of people I don't actually know. I hope you all come back. Susanna, do you want to say anything?
Sorry, I was posting Alfred's fabulous artwork and clear and concise and simple description, which I appreciate.
Yep.
No, there's a bunch of other the most controversial measures that are on the ballot were already discussed. It's pretty much the Richmond situation. I live in Antioch and there's like nothing local on our ballot for a change. And there's like I think there's 4 school board bonds out here. In Contra Costa, there's a special district bond. And then there's I don't know, 4 or 5 sales tax bonds. And frankly, the only one I've heard any controversy about among that group is the Pittsburgh school bond. But the Pittsburgh school district desperately needs some money. The biggest con that I heard to any of these is they already have bonds that haven't been paid off. So it's a lot of debt for a community to be taking on. I mean, these are in Pittsburgh, Martinez, San Ramon, Byron, which is really tiny, Pinole, which is tiny, San Ramon, those communities. So that's the biggest con that I've heard about it. So if anybody knows anything different, please pipe up. I am not the expert on bonds and measures in the East Bay by any stretch of the imagination. Jamin, you did a fabulous job. That was the major controversy for Contra Costa. But thanks everybody for coming. Totally appreciate it.